It is Chiefs Broncos this Sunday. I'm so pumped, I just can't take it. So let's talk Broncos.
What do you want to do?
I don't know. What do you want to do?
I know.
Let's talk Broncos. What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new edition of Bronco Talk, where we talk Denver Broncos football. But before we delve into the topics at hand today, do me a huge favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel so we can continue to reach members of Broncos country and build this platform. Now, before I get too deep into the woods on the Chiefs, a couple of things since Thursday night, and if you're a Broncos fan like me, you'll take the dub, but you weren't exactly thrilled with the results of how we played. Now, defense excluded, obviously, because they balled all night long, but offensively, we were out of rhythm, we were out of sync, and it's leaving a lot of Broncos country, pundits, ESPN analysts, whoever it might be. You turn on the TV and they're talking Denver Broncos, they're talking about how possibly Bo Nix and Sean Payton aren't a good fit for each other, when just 12 months ago we were talking about how Bo Nix might have a little, give Sean Payton a little bit of a hard time, or he might have some Ferris Bueller in him, or whoever you ask Sean Payton, you ask the columnists that are writing the stories, you ask the pundits on ESPN, they obviously they were talking about, some discrepancies, but everyone across the board, I feel like, agreed that Sean Payton was the best play caller, best situation in Denver, best head coach for Bo Nix to be successful. And it's pretty strange that just 12 months later, and maybe even less, considering at this point last season we were just starting to get rolling, but that we're maybe exploring a narrative where they're not a good fit. You could have also seen the same storylines or perspectives that maybe Bo Nix is just not the guy. He had a good first year, but he's just not the guy. And that's the main focus I want to make for today. And obviously it's Chiefs week, and like I said, I'm super pumped. I hope that I'm able to convey that, because I'm so stoked about the Chiefs this Sunday in Mile High. CBS is the one that's showing the game, and they're even making their studio show in Denver this week. So it's huge across the board in the NFL. As far as ratings are concerned, all eyes on Denver, and I'm Broncos country. We've been dealing with being stuck in the mud for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. When we really could have seen just a couple of decisions made differently, and we wouldn't have had to go through so much scrutiny. But we're in a good place right now with our ownership, with our coaching staff, with our roster, and with our quarterback, and that's what I want to focus on in today's video. And for me, go back to my original content when we first drafted Bo Nix, when we first made him the starting quarterback of the Denver Broncos, and you'll see that I scrutinized the decision, and I can still do that in regards to the way I believe a blueprint for a starting quarterback is. Unless you've got a next level, and I wasn't hugely sold on him, but he was the best prospect in a long time, and Trevor Lawrence, or if you go back to Andrew Luck or some of these, Peyton Manning first round draft picks, you start them out of the gate. But for every Peyton Manning, there's a Ryan Leaf. For every CJ Stroud, there's a Bryce Young. And my stance on quarterbacks and developing them is to bring them in and do more of the Green Bay Packers, what they've done, what Patrick Mahomes was fortunate enough to do, what some of these other quarterbacks that sat behind Jordan Love. Like I said, the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, he was in Atlanta, but by the time he got to Green Bay, they sat. Even Phillip Rivers sat behind Drew Brees. There's numerous quarterbacks that sat for a year, sat for 2 years, some 3 years, and digested the game, saw the game at the next level. So when they got on the field, the speed of the game had slowed down for them. And that was my argument, and continues to be my argument whenever I see a team draft a quarterback. I think that it makes the most sense to have a veteran quarterback, and we've seen in Denver how that can go astray with Joe Flacco and his comments back a handful of years ago about not wanting to babysit Drew Lock or whatever. I don't have a quote exactly, but something to that degree. So obviously you want a veteran quarterback that knows that he's not the future, and he wants to help develop the young guy. And that's why I made so many claims that Jarrett Stidham was the guy, because to start last year, and it should have been, and all of that. And we saw similar to what I said, first before the first game of the season. I think that our defense was good enough to make the playoffs, and ultimately, Bo Nix had a pretty good, pretty great. I'm not trying to sell him short rookie season, but it took him some time to kind of get the speed of things. And also, there's our argument of his record against 500 teams that are 500 or above, or playoff teams, and was he beating up on lower caliber defenses, lower caliber teams? Were we fortunate enough to have some big time offense against lower tier defense? And when it came down to it, could we win a big game? Now, last year our record in one score games was we don't want to talk about that. But this year we've turned the page, and we're actually adopting the narrative that the Chiefs had last year, which we're, whether we're playing down to our competition, or we, aren't as good as maybe teams thought, Sean Payton, or analysts thought. Sean Payton even talking about, he's only coached a handful of teams that he thought could make the Super Bowl, and this is one of them. And then when we come out on, Thursday night and show up against the Las Vegas Raiders and put up the showing that we did, it's like, what team were you looking at, Sean? So there is a little bit of that in my argument that Jarrett Stidham starting, even the first handful of games would have delayed the clock for Bo Nix. And maybe we're not having that discussion that we're having right now about Bo Nix because the clock wouldn't have started on him, and we wouldn't have had such high expectations. And that's usually the argument why maybe a Daniel Jones, who's doing very well in Indy, or Sam Darnold, who has earned himself a starting caliber quarterback contract, and he's doing what he's doing in Seattle, is because the clock was started and they got rid of those quarterbacks in New York, both of them in New York, and they went on to be a retread, and it took some time, and they sat the way that I believe that most quarterbacks coming into the NFL should do, which is sit, learn the game, learn the offense, and then when the time's right, go out there. And it's worked for numerous quarterbacks, mostly Packers organization, but you'll look at Phillip Rivers, you look at Patrick Mahomes, the guy that we're facing this Sunday, and he sat behind Alex Smith, and when the time was right, he was thrown into the as the starting quarterback. Andy Reid knew what he had. The rest of the league didn't know what he had, and he's been just going ever since. And now I'm not saying Bo Nix is Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying that he's Phillip Rivers. He's his own guy, and he should be recognized as such. He should be criticized and critiqued as such. He is a smaller stature guy with a little bit he's got an above average arm. He's just not throwing it as far as Patrick Mahomes or some of the guys mentioned. Aaron Rodgers, gunslinger. Jordan Love, gunslinger. Brett Favre. So all the examples, he doesn't necessarily fit in that mold. But that's why maybe it would have been smart to delay his clock. Start him, middle of last season, or let him sit the full season. If we were rocking and rolling the way that I thought we were going to, regardless of the quarterback, maybe Jarrett Stidham leads us to the playoffs and we still lose in the first round, and we're right here starting the clock on Bo Nix, and none of that even matters. But the other argument that I'm going to advocate for, and I do believe there's enough truth in it to digest it and say, hey, let's take the first 10 games and just be joyful and happy that we're at 8-2, and we're 1-1 in the division, and we've got a division opponent this Sunday after a mini bye week. And that's the amount of miles that the Denver Broncos have traveled. That's the fact that we went overseas and came back without getting our bye week, and then playing, even though it's a Thursday night game at home, a division opponent. Division games are just naturally tougher than conference games, than interconference games. It's a different animal. So The Raiders came into Denver ready to play. They played pretty solid defense if you take into consideration, where they were coming into the game, ranked, I believe, 19th or the middle of the road, later in the pack of overall defense, and they played pretty strong defense on Thursday night. And then you've got a fatigued Denver Broncos squad that's maybe taking their opponent and their record, and I would never accuse Sean Payton of falling into a trap game. I think that he does very well in getting the Denver Broncos, or when he was with the Saints, and he's obviously a Bill Parcells, uh, you know, branch of Bill Parcells' coaching tree, so he knows the philosophical, the psychological makeup of what a trap game looks like, and he's very in tune with that, and he helps the team not fall into that trap. At the same time, fatigue can wear on a team. And then the conditions. Let's not forget the wind that was swirling. It just wasn't ideal conditions to play good offense, just when you take all things into consideration. That's not an excuse, because with 10 days off, if we don't have a home game showing against the Kansas City Chiefs that would look more like an AFC top flight team, a division winning team, even a playoff team, then I'm done making excuses for the Denver Broncos, because I'm someone that will criticize 6 days a week and then stand all game on Sunday clapping until my hands hurt and I'm just wincing after the game. But I brought it all game long, even from hundreds of miles away. I'm loud and proud, and you'll get that from me 24/7. But 6 days a week, I'm going to criticize. But when I get to it with a fine tooth comb, when I look at the team with a microscope, I'm like, you know what? This team is doing things that other teams don't typically do, with their travel from London, not getting the bye, with a second year quarterback and a head coach that's never coached or started a rookie quarterback. There's going to be some growing pains, and I mentioned that last year in my argument for why we should have started Jarrett Stidham. And I'm not going against that argument, but I've come to agree that maybe Sean Payton was right in that regard, to start Bo Nix and start that clock. It just gives you less of a timeline to give Bo Nix excuses, or give him time to learn, is the way that I would look at it. So Broncos country, I think personally you could look at the clock being started a little early, but ultimately when you look at this season in a vacuum, we've had some tough games, we've had a lot of travel, and we've had an offense that hasn't had rhythm at all season long. And that was my biggest thing going into this year, watching the preseason. I believe that we kind of shot ourselves in the foot not playing more series in the preseason. And that's counterintuitive. Not a lot of teams do a lot of series in the preseason, but when you're stalling out consistently, and you've got this new weapon, Evan Ingram, you've got Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton been working together as long as they have. That's Cortland Sutton is Bo Nix's security blanket. You've got a new running back, J.K. Dobbins. You've got a new rookie running back, R.J. Harvey. A lot of moving parts. Let's not turn on the fire hose and make it the greatest show on turf offense and show them all the gadgets and things that we have. But let's get some first downs. Let's score some touchdowns. And I know we went undefeated in the preseason, but that wasn't because our starting offense was lighting it up by any means. So I had some apprehensions going into this season on offense because of that, because of the moving parts. But when you take it in the vacuum and you look at, hey, all these moving parts, and we're 8-2, and we've had all this travel, no bye week yet, couple of injuries, Patrick Surtain, Alex Singleton. Shout out to Alex Singleton for being a dog. We'll talk more about that tomorrow in the videos following up, leading up to the game on Sunday. Now J.K. Dobbins, that's another one we'll talk about later in the week. But J.K. Dobbins going down and with a foot injury. We've had some challenges. Every team does, but we're 8-2, and I think that on Thursday night, the weather conditions, the fatigue, and maybe taking your opponent a little bit for granted, led to the negative feeling on offense. And I think Vance Joseph did great. He got the defense ready to play. We played solid defense. We were attacking all night long. Nick Bonito got a sack and a half, got off the schneid. I predicted 2 sacks, not tooting my own horn, but I did see Nick Bonito, showing up for that game, and it was impactful in more ways than one. He was the one that swiped at Geno's legs, and once Geno's not the most mobile quarterback, but he's not a statue either. So when his knee got injured, and definitely not advocating for injuries in football, play safe, do things right. But when that happened, because of Nick Bonito's hustle and his grit and just how good he is, that kind of took the Raiders offense from being a threat, maybe winning the game, maybe scoring another touchdown, to, well, he's a standing target, just go after him and just attack. And that being said, the secondary showed up. It was across the board. The defense was on fire, but Broncos country, don't go too crazy with how bad our offense looked on Thursday, because with the mini bye, with a division opponent on Sunday, and with the bye week following that to get healthy and go attack the stretch run leading into the playoffs, I think we are set up for success. So don't get too frustrated now. Plenty of Bo Nix tape to watch, plenty of things to see the rest of the way, because Bo Nix is going to keep it rocking and rolling regardless of what I've said in the past. So let's show up on Sunday loud and proud for the Chiefs. Believe in Bo. Let's all Bo-lieve. And if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's go Broncos.